Let's go to this big story today, and the JSE's leading indicator, the all-share index, hitting 100,000 points. That's a historic high, and that's 1,000 times higher than its starting value of 100 points 65 years ago. The all-share index represents 125 listed companies on the JSE with a combined market capitalization of 21 trillion rand. We speak now to Mark Randall, who's the JSE Director for Information Services. Very good evening, Mark, and welcome to Power Business. Were there celebrations today as the JSE hit that 100,000 point?
Hi, Tehillah. Good evening. Thank you for having me on your show. This is actually something we've been waiting for. Unfortunately, you can't predict how prices change. But this morning at 1 minute past 9, we went over the level. There was absolutely a celebration. It is a really great milestone for us today.
All right. So the story of the last 5 years have been quite remarkable for the JSE, coming from the pandemic lows to now reach these historic highs. Just talk us through how fortunes really turned around and changed.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where you don't live in a vacuum. The JSE All-Share Index at the end of the day is really just the average performance of all the companies available on the JSE. But I think what we have seen over the past couple of years, particularly after the low before that, is that investors have really continued to place their trust in the South African market, and more so the ability of our homegrown and listed companies, I guess, to continue to drive growth and deliver value and innovate, and I guess in some really difficult circumstances. But it's been great to see that overall performance of our corporate sector come through in the headline index number.
At the same time, there's multiple problems confronting the South African economy. We've been through load shedding over the last 5 years. We've had major problems with freight and logistics. We also had the uprising in Durban in KZN. So there's been so many problems in so-called Main Street economy, but the JSE has continued to do very well.
Yeah, and maybe a story there of South African resilience in very difficult circumstances. And the ability to continue to expand and innovate and raise capital. But I think what is important, despite all of that, every stock on the JSE is actually accessible, to every investor, to every retail investor, to every man on the street. So despite what some of the negatives are, there always is this opportunity for everybody to share a part of the growth of some of the big names that you see every day.
The JSE's makeup is very different to the way that it looked in 1960, certainly with the emergence of technology companies, fintech companies. Just to take us through some of the changes that have been observed in the last 65 years.
And it's weird as you think about some of the big names today, and reflect on some of the big names from 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago that don't exist anymore. So, I mean, even as recently as 2005, we see names like SAB Miller in the index. Obviously, a lot of global corporate actions there. De Beers is probably another very famous one. And I think that the capital markets continues to be something that is really constantly evolving. As we see, maybe mining companies grow 1 year and then the financial companies pull back, and vice versa. And that's a function of what's happening in South Africa, I think, of where our South African companies are investing. But also there's absolutely a global tapestry here. And I think the story of capital markets globally has been a story of steady listings, of delistings, of successes, of failures, of demergers and corporate actions. It really is an innovative and dynamic space. And I think that's really what attracts people and keeps it exciting.
I'm glad you mentioned delistings, because we were actually speaking on the Market Pulse that there have been a number of delistings in recent years from the JSE. And what do you think this is a function of?
And interesting enough, because we watch our market very, very closely. I don't think that our trend is unique. There's been some interesting work from the World Federation of Exchanges recently about a global decrease in IPOs and increase in delistings. So I don't think that's uncommon. Globally, of course, we watch the space very, very closely. On the one hand, we have seen a very rapid and strong increase in market capitalization So the companies that people are investing in are growing. Some of that is driven by mergers, which may, decrease the number of companies, but increase the overall market size. But then, of course, at the end of the day, we are competing for investor money. So there are other opportunities, whether that is, some emerging digital assets, or whether it is private equity or offshore assets. So that continues to ebb and flow. I think what I am pleased about, the JSE is showing growth of nearly 19% this year from January.
Wow.
You can compare that to any country, to any currency. You can compare it to NASDAQ, to S&P. We right up there. We've got returns that are really exceptional for our local investors. And we think as long as we continue to offer those returns or opportunities for returns in a trusted, regulated, credible financial markets ecosystem, there's a lot of opportunity for us.
Let's turn to then the proposal by the JSE, and not just the JSE, other indices around the world, including the London Stock Exchange, to trade 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and we've seen this operating model being proven in digital assets, in particular in crypto. And so there have been some recent announcements by NASDAQ, by LSE, as you say, by the New York Stock Exchange. So there's some big names that have made some commitments about moving to 24/7. The JSE is not quite at that space yet, but we watch it so closely. We've got probably a quarter of our companies that are listed on other exchanges that are just listed. So it really matters to those companies and the fact that we need to understand the trajectory of global markets. So I think the benefits of 24/7, it obviously enables real-time trading. So investors can respond to news flow and activity in real time. You don't have to wait for the next day. You can buy in and sell out of positions immediately. A lot of pros to that. I think we're quite careful about saying, does it come at any price? Does it continue to enhance our market quality, depth of liquidity? Can we still ensure that when you want to come into the market, there will be somebody to trade with, that we can still make sure that the settlement runs seamlessly, that we can still deliver prices to your trading terminal. There's a whole trading ecosystem behind that to make sure that a transition like that becomes really, really valuable. But I think capital markets are being forced to innovate. Whether it's 24/7 or a reduction of the settlement cycle, or thinking about different kinds of digital assets. Even though the company's over 130 years old, it's really critical to make sure that the investment offerings that we can position for investors remain competitive, remain innovative, and remain relevant.
And you celebrated the 100,000 point mark today, but what's the next milestone or goal that you'll be looking out for?
I think one of the privileges of my job is that I don't need to predict the market. There are a lot of other people out there that can do that. We make sure that we continue to keep things ticking smoothly. So I think that as long as we're following the right trajectory, that we continue to have good South African companies providing real investment opportunities, we're going to celebrate that. But the team continues to work to say, how do we get the right kind of product to market, and the right kind of diversification of product. So for us, I think it's really a game of small increments, of saying, let's make sure that we're constantly adding things that create opportunities for our investors.
Right. Thanks very much for your time, Mark Randall, who's the JSE Director for Information Services.